Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Mikey McNuggets or Mike Lucas to some coming at you on a Thursday afternoon here in rainy Cleveland. It is a disgusting day in the city of Cleveland, but it's not going to stop us from talking a little Cleveland Cavaliers. On the docket for today's stream, we're going to talk about the future team building strategies in the NBA and whether or not the Cavs are positioned well to fit those said strategies. How Evan Mobley can take the next step in his evolution, and can he do it flanked by Donovan and Darius? And then we'll look at the NBA draft, which is officially less than a week away. The first round tips off next Wednesday. The second round, which the Cleveland Cavaliers have 2 picks late in the second round, that happens on Thursday. So we'll look at some targets that maybe Cleveland could be interested in taking with their 49th and 58th picks in the draft. But let's start with the future team building strategies in the NBA. In the past, guys, we're talking historically speaking here, and most notably in the early 2000s to mid 2000s, even up until COVID and the year or two so after, it was all about the proverbial big three: LeBron, Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh. LeBron, Anthony Davis trying to find that third, Kobe, Gasol, Lamar, Andrew Bynum for different, like there's always been these different kinds of big threes: Durant, James Harden, Russell Westbrook. Like there's been so many iterations of the big three. But I think with the second apron and some of the cap restrictions that come along with keeping super teams together is going to change the way teams try and assemble a championship roster moving forward. Instead of trying to get as much star power as humanly possible and jam it into a roster and say, if we have 3 high-paid stars, 3 guys that are eating up 70% of the cap, we'll fill the other 12 roster spots with veteran minimum guys, rookie contracts, second-round picks, just to be able to fill out a roster and find guys that complement what our stars do. You go back to the Heatles. They're the biggest and best example of this. The Shane Battiers, the Mike Millers, the Mario Chalmers, the Udonis Haslams. The list goes on, guys. Also, if we're talking big threes, Kevin Love, Kyrie, LeBron James here in Cleveland. Like it's not a foreign concept. But the strategy used to be when putting these teams together was get the stars and figure out the rest later. It was simple, at least on paper. It worked a lot less often than teams thought, but that was the overall team building strategy that a lot of the general managers across the association decided to go with. But I think as we move further and further into this second apron era, where there's a hard cap for certain teams, not just in the second apron, but in the first apron, it is more difficult than ever to retain superstar talent because of the player empowerment movement, because of the different kinds of contracts teams can offer, and because the fact some owners don't want to pay the exuberant luxury tax bills that come along with, is this player, even though he's worth $10 million on the salary cap, really worth $62 million actual dollars out of my pocket? So instead of assembling these quote-unquote super teams, I think the way we're going to see the NBA try and structure championship rosters is the quote-unquote weak link theory. I'm going to simplify that as best I can. You can put any 5 guys out there on the court, and you've heard the expression before: a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Well, in basketball, how good's your weakest link? How good's your 5th best player? And do you have the versatility, the depth, the adaptability to switch up who that 5th player is depending on the team you're playing? Look at Indiana and Oklahoma City. Tonight's Game 6. The Thunder can clinch the NBA championship with a win tonight. Shout out to Sam Presti, a fellow Emerson College basketball alum looking for his first title tonight. But look at how those 2 teams played in the regular season. Look at the lineups they closed with in the regular season. Now look at the lineups they are closing with in the NBA Finals. Isaiah Hartenstein was the Thunder's biggest acquisition this offseason. They paid him basically a 3-year, $90 million contract. The 3rd year is a team option, and it's a decreasing salary year by year. So, it's a team-friendly contract, but it still was a $90 million contract from a mid-major team. The Pacers, they closed with Miles Turner all playoffs. For the last 10 years, he's essentially been a foundation and a staple of Indiana's closing lineups. But in the finals, Rick Carlisle's felt like he's our weakest link in this series. Oklahoma City's continuing to put him in pick-and-roll action, continuing to attack him. And because he's not making shots, he's not bringing the offensive value that makes up and mitigates his lack of defensive value against this particular matchup. Now, Turner was great against the Knicks. He was great against the Cavs. He was great against the Bucks. It's just a bad matchup against OKC. So instead of forcing Turner back onto the court because that's what he's done all postseason and all regular season. Carlisle's opted to start closing games with Obi Toppin at the 5 alongside Pascal Siakam with Miles Turner on the bench. That's that versatility and flexibility to change your closing lineups to match what the other team is doing. Now, has it worked? In stretches, Toppin's had some big games. He was great in game 3 when the Pacers won, 5 threes in game 1 as well. Like, he's had his moments. They're still down 3-2 in the series, so it hasn't been this unmitigatable like X factor that has forced OKC to change their strategy and put them at a disadvantage. But it goes to show that just because a closing group got you there, it doesn't have to finish the deal. The Thunder are in the same scenario. Isaiah Hartenstein was a starter when he was healthy all season. They started the two bigs, Holmgren and Hartenstein. And they both played a significant amount of minutes, and oftentimes they closed together. But just like Miles Turner on the other end of the court, the Thunder have had to make changes to their closing lineup because Hartenstein's the weak link against this Pacers high-flying offensive attack. Indy continued to put him in pick and rolls, continued to make him the decision maker on defense, and Halliburton was just outthinking, outsmarting, outquicking him throughout different parts of the series. And now they're closing with 4 guards and Holmgren. So both teams have changed up their closing 5, and they have the depth and the flexibility and the versatility to change who their weak link is depending on the team they're playing. Now, do the Cavs have that versatility? We saw for a brief stretch during the regular season, right after the team acquired DeAndre Hunter, that Kenny Atkinson decided, you know what, I'm going to close these games with Jared Allen on the bench and DeAndre Hunter at the 4, Evan Mobley at the 5, and then some combination of Strus, Garland, Jerome, and Mitchell. And it worked, but everything worked for the Cavs in the regular season. And then when the injuries happened and guys didn't play in game 2 and then came back hobbled for games 3, 4, and 5 against the Pacers, they didn't have the ability to execute at the level they needed to counteract what Indiana was doing. Now, Indiana outplayed them. I'm not taking anything away. I'm not saying if they were healthy, they would have won the series. No, Indiana flat out outplayed them. But does a core 4 with 4 players, and actually 5 because DeAndre Hunter makes $23 million, 5 players eating up that much of a second apron team's salary sheet, give you enough flexibility and versatility to mix and match against different teams in different scenarios in playoff situations? The regular season matters, but this is a playoff issue that you have to be prepared for when the calendar flips from March to April. You could be versatile and flexible against the Detroit Pistons and the Portland Trail Blazers and the Brooklyn Nets and the Charlotte Hornets of the world all you want. But do you feel comfortable going with a different closing 5, 4 out of 7 games against a team that won 50 games in the regular season? Kenny Atkinson wasn't this previous year. Maybe he will be in year 2 as the Cavs head coach, but we won't find that out until October, November, December, and so on and so on. So when I look at the Cavs, are they built for this future team building scenario of the NBA? I think to a degree, yes. They have the 2 or 3 stars at the top that are max players, but based on when these guys sign their extensions, are not, like, for example, Darius makes $40 million. That's a lot of money. Is he a max player? No, but in a year or two, $40 million is going to be a relative bargain for an all-star caliber guard. So like they have that part of it down, but I'm not sure if the depth that they actually had last year on the bench is versatile and adaptable enough to mix and match how you want to play. There are going to be instances where you have to play faster. There are instances where you have to play slower, where you need more shooting, where you need more length, where you need the ability to rebound. And I don't think the Cavs have the requisite depth in that regard to be flexible enough to compete with some of these elite teams. And we've said this stat before. I'll say it again. We'll get on to the next topic. But the Cavs this year are one of just 16 teams ever in the history of the NBA to win 64 regular season games and have an average margin of victory of 9 points or better. The Thunder also in that category. So before this year, there were 14 teams that had ever done that. 12 of those teams won the championship and 13 made the finals. That level of regular season success should translate, and historically has translated, from the regular season to the playoffs. But for whatever reason, it didn't for Cleveland. And I think part of the reason it didn't happen was they simply weren't adaptable enough to mix and match what worked best against Indiana. Cleveland played its style. And granted, injuries played a role in it. I am not absolving that. I am fully aware that this series was a little different if injuries weren't as one-sided as it was. But injuries happen in basketball. You can't avoid that. It's an unfortunate reality of the game. Just like Tyrese Halliburton getting injured in the NBA Finals. It's part of basketball. The Cavs weren't good enough to adapt on the fly to meet Indiana's pace and its style and its tenacity. Let's talk a little Evan Mobley, guys, because if the Cavs are going to become a more versatile, flexible, adaptable team, part of it starts with Evan Mobley's ascension on offense. Now, he did take a gigantic step forward from year 3 to year 4, his first under Kenny Atkinson. We talked about this 2 weeks ago. Jordan Ott, the new head coach of the Phoenix Suns, deserves a ton of credit for taking the lead on Evan's development. He was instrumental in making Evan a second-team All-NBA caliber performer this year. His offensive game got better. He got more comfortable from beyond the arc. He got more comfortable off the dribble. So what's the next step? How does Evan continue to improve? Well, A, he has to become a mid-range assassin. He only took 38 mid-range shots the entire season. Now, the Cavs as a team wanted threes and layups. The team as a whole did not take a ton of mid-range shots. But with Evan Mobley's touch and his size and his athleticism, I think that's an area where Evan can frankly dominate a lot of other bigs. And it's an area I hope the Cavs make a bigger emphasis on to attack next season. Going back to that Indiana series when the threes weren't falling, it was all on Donovan to get to the lane and create. Granted, Evan had a sprained ankle, but a nice little caveat and change of pace to a layup and 3 offense is throw the ball to the high post and let a guy isolate, because the Pacers weren't helping. They were forcing guys to beat them one-on-one. And let me ask you what you think is a better option from an offensive efficiency standpoint. A clearly hobbled Donovan Mitchell attacking Aaron Nesmith and Andrew Nembhard off the dribble and having to shoot over one of those bigger defenders, or Evan Mobley working in the high post against not a bad defender, but a Pascal Siakam who's a average defender at best. There's certainly a case to be made for Donovan, but when Donovan was shooting at the percentage he was shooting at late in the series, clearly looking as gassed as he did, would have loved to see them go back to Evan. And that falls on Donovan, and that falls on Darius, and that falls on Kenny Atkinson and his coaching staff, and it falls on Evan Mobley. He has to be more demonstrative, more assertive, demand the ball. It has to be a focus of the coaching staff to include him in the offensive game plan, to run design plays for Evan Mobley, to unlock even another level of confidence in number 4, to know that when I get the ball, the best option for my team is for me to actually attack, to shoot, to be aggressive. When he is in attack mode, when he is going downhill, good things happen for Cleveland. When he's passive, when he's not looking to score, teams sag off him, make him a facilitator, and he's a very willing and capable passer, but it puts more pressure on everyone else to be the one that breaks the defense. Evan, and part of the reason he got tabbed a unicorn coming out of USC, he had the ability to do all of this stuff, and he showed it in glimpses last year. And he made second-team All-NBA, which I know at some point gets a little skewed because of all the guys who were ineligible because of the missed games, and was he really? It doesn't matter. He made All-NBA second team. By that nature, he was one of the top 10 players in the NBA last season. Do I think he's top 10 if you're making who are the best players in the league right now list? No, I think he's between 15 and 20. But he certainly deserved his All-NBA second-team recognition. And it wouldn't shock me to see him find himself on that very same list again next year. With Darius out early, it is the perfect opportunity for Evan Mobley to continue his ascension on the offensive end of the court. Darius is going to miss, most likely, according to reports, the first month or so of the season. And if that is the case, then the Cavs better feature Evan Mobley as the predominant force in their offense. Donovan will get his without having to have plays run for him. That's just who Donovan is. He is a walking bucket. Evan, on the other hand, is more a recipient of offense because he needs someone to pass him the ball. He needs Donovan or Evan or Darius, to get him the rock. He's very infrequently being the guy taking the ball up the court, leading the offensive charge. He's the recipient. Most bigs are. Giannis, one of the rare exceptions. But he's capable of catching the three-point line and attacking guys off the dribble. He's capable of finishing in the high post around guys. If other teams are going to switch pick and rolls, punish them in the paint. Evan has the ability to do so, It just becomes a concerted effort from everyone else around him to get him the rock. All right, let's get to our last topic on today's stream. The NBA draft, 6 days away. The Cavs are on the clock for another 7 days. They don't pick on Wednesday. They do not have a first-round pick. That pick belongs to the Utah Jazz as part of the Donovan Mitchell trade. But the Cavs do have 2 second-round picks, 49 and 58. The second-to-last pick in the draft, and 49 is considered a late second-round pick. It is darn near impossible to predict who will be on the board, what kind of players the Cavs are targeting, what they're looking for. So I'm going to give you a more broad overview of what I think would be the best case scenario and the best strategy for Cleveland in this second round. First and foremost, let me ask you a question. We talked about depth at the beginning of this stream. You know my thoughts on it. So I'll ask you, do you think the Cavs have enough depth currently to win an NBA championship? I'll give you 10 seconds. Okay, we all agree. The answer is no. The answer is simply no. The Cavs need more guys, more reliable guys, to put in a playoff series if some of their starters aren't playing up to par. And the Cavs had depth in the regular season, but some of that depth in the regular season evaporates when guys like Dean Wade and Isaac Okoro become absolute pumpkins in the playoffs. When Jared Allen jokingly said the lights were brighter than we thought against the Knicks 3 postseasons ago now, we didn't think that would be a prevailing running trend with this team moving forward. So that's where we are. The Cavs need pumpkin insurance is basically what I'm coming down to. My buddy Carter Rodriguez, who does the Chase Down pod, the Cavaliers official team pod, kind of coined that term, and I think it's brilliantly put. There are certain guys who just aren't made for playoff moments. They're pumpkins. So you need pumpkin insurance. And what's the best way to accumulate pumpkin insurance? Via the draft. Take guys that have played 4, 5, even 6 years in college who have a plethora of in-game experience that may not have the highest of high ceilings, but you kind of know what you're getting. Give you a couple names, for example. Vlad Golden, the big man out of Michigan, who played at FAU before he transferred to Michigan with Dusty May. A 5-year guy, played in over not 200, but over 150 collegiate games. Is he ever going to be a superstar in the NBA? Probably not. Are you getting essentially a finished product in a Vlad Golden? You probably are. A Ryan Nembhard, the same way out of Gonzaga, the point guard, the younger brother of Andrew Nembhard on Indiana. 5-year player, Creighton Gonzaga, led the country in assists last year at 10 dimes a game. He's undersized. He's older. That's why he's not going to be a first-round pick. But he's a guy that, if you think can probably play right away. A la a Craig Porter Jr., who the Cavs drafted 2 years ago, who was one of the first COVID-era athletes to utilize his 5th year, go back, and then decide to enter the draft. He was 24 when he was drafted. I don't know exactly how old Golden and Nembhard are, but they're certainly not young chickens if you've played 5 years of college. That limits your overall ceiling. The Cavs took a swing on Emoni Bates in the second round 2 years ago, a guy who played 1 year of college with a high ceiling, and he's yet to be able to contribute anything meaningful on the court for the NBA version of the Cavs. He's been stuck in the G League, where he's had an okay G League career. High volume scorer, not the most efficient player, not the greatest defender, but clearly a shot maker of his own right. But that hasn't helped the NBA version of the Cavs. And I don't think it makes sense for a Cavs team looking for cheap players in a win-now mode who can actually contribute to continue to take flyers on guys who may not be ready to contribute on the NBA level right away. Now, does Emoni Bates have a higher ceiling than the 2 guys I just mentioned? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But do the Cavs have the time to develop a young player that fits their current timeline to allow them to grow into the players that maybe an Emoni Bates or a 1 year, one and done kind of guy could be? The answer is no. The answer is no, guys. The Cavs are against the clock. They're in a 3-year championship window. This was year 1. They have 2 more years in this window before they have to then duck back down below the second apron to avoid these incredibly harsh repeater offender taxes. And Dan Gilbert's got a lot of money, but at some point, when you have to freeze future draft picks and you are losing draft picks because you are spending at a rate that is too high to sustain, which, by the way, happens if you're a repeat offender for 3 or 4 years in the second apron. Don't quote me on that. I think it's 4 years, but I'm not 100% positive. And that's the world where the Cavs are in right now. So if I'm Cleveland, if I'm Kobe Altman, if I'm Mike Gansey next week, What I am doing is looking for guys who I think can contribute immediately. Veteran players out of college, high floor, low ceiling guys. You're not going to get a superstar in the second round that late, most likely. It has happened, but it's very unlikely. So I'd rather go with the safer pick, a guy with the higher floor, a guy I think could contribute right away in some capacity, even if it's in a smaller role, to the NBA Cavs and not the Cleveland Charge. The Cavs need NBA players, NBA role guys, and they've done a good job developing guys from second-round picks, a Dean Wade, a Sam Merrill, into rotational contributors. And they need more of that, because it's going to be incredibly hard to acquire talent via free agency and via trade with some of these second apron restrictions that Kobe Altman and Mike Gansey are going to have to be dealing with moving forward. We'll be back next Thursday after the draft to recap who the Cavs took with their 2 second-round selections, or if they trade back up to take one guy in the second round. We'll have all that for you right here on the Bleacher Report app. I appreciate you all tuning in. Have a great Thursday, and we'll see you next week. Go Cavs.